Hi, today I am here with John R. Price, author of contemporary Christian fiction. Welcome to Between the Lines, John. It's so nice to have you here.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Glad to be with you.
I'm glad to have you here. We don't get a lot of men on here, I'm going to say. In fact, when I scheduled you, I think my
Okay.
husband said, is this like number three or number four? And I've been doing this for 4 years. We do not find a lot of men who are writing Christian fiction, which is too bad.
hmm
So it's nice to have somebody, a new face and a new book to talk
hmm
about. So your book is called Whitman's Choice, and I'm going to let you, before we even start about the book, let's talk about you a little bit. Um,
Okay.
I know you're a college professor, right?
hmm
Technical business classes.
That's
So you
right.
probably have a good handle on business acumen, more than most people.
I would say I have pretty good at understanding. Yes.
Yeah. That's important if you're teaching other people, right?
hmm
Yes.
And I've been helping my wife at times in the past. She had a small business for a short while. I gave her some suggestions and things to help her with that. And unfortunately, with her health and some things that happened, she was not able to continue her business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was a corporate writer type business, and that's what she was trying to do. Um, and then I've also had this venture getting involved with this book that I've been doing. Of course, now it's taken me a little while it's been a sort of a journey getting from the initial idea of getting a book to trying to get it published and getting suggestions about maybe you need to go back and change some stuff and change the way you're doing some things. And so it's been sort of a journey for me to get to this
Yes.
point where we are now.
It's not an easy journey. I have friends that say, "Oh, I've got an idea. I'm going to write me a book and make some money." And my first response is, "Do not quit your day job because it doesn't, the average writer, if they're doing anything, and I got this from a reliable source at several writing workshops that I've done over the years. The average writer makes $5,000 a year. It's pretty
Which can be,
sad.
yeah, it's pretty small, but it can be helpful. I have to say that it would be nice if did if this novel did this, it would be nice if it did. It would help.
Well, the problem is, in order to get anywhere, you're paying for
Yeah,
advertising, you're paying. I mean,
right.
John and I talked about this before we actually started recording, how, just to do advertising, it can be very pricey. And if you're not selling enough books, it's a touch and go kind of thing and
hmm
not an easy venture. It really is not. So, John, tell
hmm
us about Whitman's Choice. This is an interesting concept for a book. It's a child star, correct?
Right.
Child
hmm
star who is, so I'm going to start with that. You tell us the book. What's Whitman's Choice about?
Well, Whitman's Choice is about a former child star by the name of Michael Whitman, who is from originally from Plano, Texas, and he was a very popular child actor back in the 1980s. Uh, got on a very popular TV show. The name of the TV show was called Goodwin Circle, and anyway, that was a typical sitcom of the time, family sitcom.
Yeah.
And so he became very popular along with his sister. They both ended up starring on the same show together as brother and sister. So real life brother and sister. His sister's name is Stacy, and so both of them ended up starring on this show together as a brother and sister in this sitcom. And they didn't expect to get make it to that far. They didn't know that they went to an audition there near their home in North Texas, and somehow they ended up going through all the audition stuff and made it.
Okay.
They got chosen, and so we start off the story with finding out that Michael, now grown, um, has a problem, and we understand he's now married. In fact, he met his future wife. He met his wife on the show. She was a actress in her own right. Her name is Celeste, and so they met on the show at some point near, possibly I think it was near the end of the run, and so anyway, they ended up falling in love and they got married after the show was over with, and moved on with their lives. But anyway, we're dealing with when the story begins, we find out he's got a problem. He has found out some news that's got him very puzzled and concerned about what has the news he's learned. And so he steps back. We learn a little bit about what had happened over the. We actually flash back to what happened previously over, when he was a child and how they got in the business a little bit, some of the things they went through with dealing with the pressures of being in Hollywood and all that. And then we come back to the modern day and we actually find out what happened. And that is Celeste.
You're not going to do a spoiler alert, right? Is this,
Hmm?
you don't want to leave a spoiler alert.
No, well, I just simply say that he finds out that his wife, well, they got a call to come back and do a sequel series.
Okay.
They had done a couple of TV movies back in the early 2000s, and that was all they did after this. I mean, the series ran 10 years on network television, and then there were two TV movies, and then Mike said, "I'm tired of this. I don't want to keep doing this." And he didn't like the roles that were coming, so he left Hollywood for a voiceover job, and that's what he's doing when we get to modern day. He's doing voiceover work. Um, and Celeste occasionally, I think, does some acting, but not as much as she did when she was a younger star. But his sister has since, of course, we find out she's already moved on as well, and we understand she does some acting occasionally too. But then there's this talk about bringing back a modern day, like we get back to about I guess it was mid 2000 teens is when we're looking at when this story is set in. That there was all this talk about wanting to bring back TV shows, have sequel series, updated stuff to show how different show characters turned out and all that kind of stuff. Back several years ago, there's been a lot of this nostalgia stuff about, hey,
Right.
let's bring back certain shows and see where those characters are now.
Which is very
And
believable because you see that happening all the time.
see it all the time. And so
Right.
in this situation, Celeste and Michael and Stacy got a call to, hey, we want to bring back Goodwin Circle and we want a sequel series. And so Mike can't do it initially. He says, I got a lot of work right now. I've got a lot of voiceover work right now. I can't do it. But he encourages his wife Celeste and his sister Stacy to go ahead and, hey, I'll join y'all when I can. I'll be able to join later, but I can't do it right this first season coming up. It's got too much work. And so they go on and do it. But he does tell Celeste, don't tell me any plot lines. He wants to be surprised by it. He's the kind of person who wants to be surprised, I guess, a little bit. He doesn't want any spoilers. So obviously he comes to regret that, unfortunately, because he finds out that the new show from a friend, he finds out from his agent who stops in town one day, the uh, the show being new show being touted as family friendly, it's not.
So there's been a twist involved.
Right.
So
And so,
this is a Christian novel. So
hmm
I'm assuming now you're going to have um, the characters bumping up against their Christian convictions
hmm
and then having to make some decisions in there.
that's right.
Yeah.
There are some, in fact, his wife now, Mike's wife Celeste, she didn't let on to what was going on. She didn't spill the beans about, hey, this has been going on. But eventually, after he's found out, uh, he decides that they're going to sit down and watch the show, and she's a little concerned about wanting to watch it with him. But he already knows. She doesn't know he already knows that there's some concerns about what's in the show. And so they watch a little bit of it, and oh my gosh, it's really bad. It's a really bad situation. He hears language that he has never thought he would hear his wife use on television. His sister uses language. Um, there's just a lot of other things cluttered up in the that sentence. Like he realizes this is not what is being advertised is not. It's definitely against their convictions.
Right.
And so we find out that they were tricked.
And are they stuck like in a contract?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're stuck in a contract. So tell me, John,
Mhm.
what inspired this story? Because I'm
Well, I've always been a fan of television over the years.
classic
I
television, right?
classic television mainly. Yeah. I mean, I occasionally will watch a few shows here and there nowadays, but I've gotten to where I went for about 10 years without having access to a working television in our house. The only times I would see television would be when I was on the road or visiting my in-laws. We just didn't have it where we could turn it on and watch it. It was just the reception where we lived at the time. My wife and I lived at the time. It was non-existent. We couldn't get local channel to come in, even though we were in a metropolitan area. Um, where we lived was down in the valley, and we couldn't get anything. So for 10 years, I didn't watch, and I didn't want to spend money on streaming. I didn't want to spend money on trying to get cable, or I don't know if satellite would have even worked because we were down in the valley and a lot of trees and everything. So we just did without for several years. So, but what inspired this is back, I guess it was about 7 years ago, I became aware that there had been a TV show that had been brought back because, and I didn't know at the time that they even had brought back some of these popular shows or tried to bring back sequel series. I've had kept up with it. But I saw that there was one particular one, and I was like, they brought this show back. And so one day I got to see a clip of it, and I was just floored by the content. I was like,
Okay.
this is considered family entertainment.
So, do you want to tell us
Yeah.
what that show was?
Well, one of my friends suggested I should not. I think that adds to the mystery as to which one it is. There could be several different ones out there that could be the one, but there is one in my mind that I had that I patterned the characters somewhat after. Um, but it's been suggested I'd rather leave that for the reader to probably figure it out as to
Okay.
who it could be. But at the time when I wrote the story, I was trying to think, I almost felt like saying, I would like to send a message to folks to say, hey, there's a lot more going on here than just simply like, because when I read about this particular show, I went out and did some research. I started looking up things on, Variety and various websites, anything I could get my hands on that was talking about this particular show and some of the actors involved. And I was like, okay, what are they saying about this? Because is this considered? Because to me, I was just shocked by just the simple couple of clips I saw, and it was just two clips, short clips at that. And I was just like, if I had the chance to say it to the actor in question, I'd say, "Do you realize what y'all did here?"
Do the actors in this show, do you believe they are Christians?
There is one is noted to be a Christian. There is one that has professed to be one, and I think what happened in the real situation, my suspicion is that someone pulled a fast one and they were in a contract. And I saw several years ago a different actor, and I didn't find this until when I was doing some of my research, that there was another actor who tried to become a Christian and tried to criticize his show and eventually pulled from his show
Hmm.
for his they didn't say that was why he was removed from the show, sorry, something fell off there. But that made me think that could be why in this situation nothing was said, because I can imagine if you had an actor um, come out and make a declaration saying, "Well, I really hate what I had to do in this show," suddenly that would have that could have probably tanked the show. It could have also,
Mhm.
because there were other actors involved, their livelihoods could have been disrupted,
Okay.
and have this actor be blamed for the show's demise. I don't think they wanted that. So I think when I look at this whole situation, I'm thinking, well, I think in the behind the scenes, I think that God more or less had to step in and deal with it. And the way it was dealt with is that fellow Christians out there said, we're not going to watch this, we're not going to support this. And the show eventually tanked. I'll just tell you that it did eventually tank. But what's amazing is that it lasted longer than I think. It's amazing it lasted as long as it did. Um, it's just that I guess the way the particular streaming model that was at work, um, that someone must have had enough money to be able to let it continue, or it was making enough money to continue production. But at some point, and this is a big, being a business, major, I can see sort of the idea of because I've read about things like where these shows that the longer they run, the more expensive they get to
Right.
produce because the more time goes along, these actors can demand higher salaries because they're devoting their time to this, where they could obviously go to other projects and I guess make money from their craft. But if they're having to devote time to this, I mean, they're going to demand more money most likely. I mean, it's inevitable. That's the way it usually happens. But here's the other flip side to that. If and this is the description I've said to folks, if the costs go up every season that I go like this, if the costs go up every season, but if the revenue is dropping, meaning
Right.
if the folks are not watching, and that means they're not buying into watching the show, at some point, you're not going to run this show in the red. You can't do that. The You've got to have a little bit of a profit margin there to keep from hitting break even. Because if you hit
Right.
break even, it's unsustainable. You
Well,
can't
they're
continue.
obviously out for making money, and I just think it's a an example of the times that we live in where
Hmm.
coming to a point where we can't have a foot in each camp. You know,
Right.
I think God is really making it clear that we have got to stand our ground. And
Hmm.
if you're claiming to be a Christian, yet
Hmm.
people who don't see that the fruit is not being produced as a Christian, then
Right.
what use are you for the kingdom? You know, where
Right.
so it,
Hmm.
but then you see other people that are in a situation where they are having difficulty with money and they're making a choice here. So it all comes down to, I believe it comes down to whether you're going to trust God to provide or man to provide.
Hmm.
And I think we sell ourselves out all the time.
Hmm.
And it's a sad commentary on our culture that in order for you to be famous, Christians, especially in that industry, are really
Hmm.
being blackballed in a big way.
Right. And I think, as I said, this situation that I saw happening, I thought this would make for an interesting scenario because I had a friend who had written a book. I thought, well, that'd be an interesting way to make a comment about this whole thing because I've been watching television for years. Um, I remember, and I'll give you a funny situation. Like over the years, I remember my parents who have since passed on. Um, they controlled the television when I was a young child, and even back in the day when we only had here in this area where I lived, we only had four channels. I could count on one hand how many channels we could watch at a given time because we lived in Little Rock. And back then we only had four channels. And if you didn't like what was on those four channels, well,
You're
you had
out
to
of
find
luck.
something. Yeah, you had to find something else because we didn't have cable, we didn't have satellite, there was no streaming, we didn't have a VCR to watch. Um, Although VCRs did come along around that time, but they were expensive. I mean, $1,000 for a VCR that can only record maybe 6 hours on a tape or less. I mean, it was expensive. Um, but as time's gone along, I mean, I've seen things change where we went from just only having a handful of channels to now it's like gosh, there's a channel for almost every little interest you can think of, plus stuff on the internet, plus streaming, plus YouTube.
And yet there's usually nothing with value on television.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the shows these days, I mean, nothing against the actors or anything, but some of the shows don't strike me as being, do I really want to spend time watching this
Right.
certain scenario? Is it getting too graphic? Is it too dark? Do I really want that running through my head? Because I mean, I remember as a kid, sometimes movies scared me sometimes, or TV shows scared me. And and as I said, my parents were very careful about it when we were younger. Although I do remember as a child, sometimes my parents having to reassure me, like if we were watching a show, let's say it got a little violent, um, I remember my parents having to assure me that this is just a story. It's just a story. This is not real. This is
Right.
assuring me that it was not. No one was really hurt. No one was really killed. It's just a story. Um, and I'm glad that they did that to tell to reassure me that no one was really getting hurt or whatever. But of course, nowadays it's I fear sometimes about what kids are seeing on television and how they are possibly seeing what certain things that are being portrayed and said, and maybe some situations that are being, you know, that some of them are being subjected to seeing, and we didn't have those issues back in the day when I was a kid because one of the things that they did on television um, that the movies got away from, they had something called the television code that was in
Right.
place at the time. And that was a production code, very similar to the Hays Code for movies that they had back in the days in Hollywood. But of course, if you're not familiar with the Hays Code, that was enforced during the 30s to about the late 60s, and then that's when the rating system came in with the G and the PG and all that stuff. They did have local boards had various rating things, I think, but they came along and standardized that. I think in the movie industry wanted to have a rating system to where the parents would have to make the decision as to what, and that's where they got away from having a production code that was dictating like you can't have this in the movie, you can't have this in the movie, you can't have this in the movie, like you can't use this kind of language, you can't show these kind of things. But then they started getting First Amendment arguments being made back then. Plus, you had foreign competition that weren't subjected to those rules that were doing things, which is probably one of the reasons.
I think you
Yeah.
also have today, like there was a television show my husband and I were watching, and it was originally on one of the network TVs. It was
Mm-hmm.
fairly clean. It was a really good show. We were really enjoying it. And then when the
Mm-hmm.
next season came around, all of a sudden it was the F word. Everybody, the women,
Mm-hmm.
everybody were, what is going on? And there was explicit, disgusting sex
Mm-hmm.
scenes in it that we were just like revolted by. And I was like, I don't get it. How do they go from this really good show to all of a sudden now? Well, it turned out that they went off of the network TV and were picked up
Mm-hmm.
by a streaming service. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the last sh that was the last season that show was on because I think everybody got turned off by it. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
other thing. It's like just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it.
Right.
I mean,
And that's another thing you have to also consider. When they went, you said it was a network show. It was
yeah.
over the air network. You see, the FCC here in the United States, the Federal Communications Commission, controls broadcast licenses, and there was a big hoopla in the recent months about broadcast licenses and the FCC. Well, under the federal guidelines, because of the public airwaves are technically owned by the American people here in the States, the FCC controls who they give licenses out to. Um, and if a station is broadcasting content that goes against certain standards set by the FCC, they could have their license revoked. And so I know there's been some debates in recent months about comments and things made on certain shows, um, that kind of stuff. But when you mentioned about the show moving from broadcast to streaming, the FCC has no
Right.
control there.
Well, I
Uh,
figured that, yeah.
yeah, and so the FC, because it went to subscription based service, and this is the same issue that happens with cable to a certain extent, with your basic what traditional cable type channels, that they can get away with a little bit more stuff than say an over the air broadcast channel can at this time. But I don't know if anything changes in some of the standards that the FCC is having to uphold. It gets a little scary to think what could happen in the future if they allow, because in some other parts of the world, I mean, other countries, they're more relaxed as to what they'll put on television. I mean, some of the things that, and again, I've read about this too, and actually have uh, seen a couple of examples where this has happened, where the content gets very different in other countries. It's really shocking.
Well, I think it's a sad commentary on our time that we see more and more of it. And I think what happens is
Mm-hmm.
we become desensitized to it, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden that stuff isn't affecting us like it should. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and who is watching the kids? How many kids are sitting home without any parents there
Oh
to
yeah.
watch them, or they have televisions in their bedroom that
Hmm.
nobody is controlling, that they can watch whatever they want, or they have iPads and they have iPhones or whatever phones or tablets or whatever they have. You see little kids under the age of 2 now walking around
Hmm.
with a screen of some sort, and
Right.
hopefully there's somebody paying attention, but we're training our children to be attached to the screens, and i'm
Hmm.
i'm afraid of what's going to happen with communication, if they're
Hmm.
communicating through phones, through texting with each other. Somebody was telling me that their kids were in the back seat and they were texting each other in the back seat instead of just talking.
That's scary.
But that's the way you go
Yeah.
into any restaurant, and it's amazing to me. We don't go out that much, but when we do, and there are people there, everybody's
Hmm.
attached to their phones. They don't even talk to each other anymore.
And I have to admit on that part about the phone, sometimes I know my wife and I will be at we'll talk we still talk to each other. We don't chat to each other on our phones or anything like that when we're out in a restaurant. But I have to admit there are times like if we are looking up something or checking an email or checking a text message from someone. I mean, I understand you could say the issue about people being attached to their phone to a certain extent. I've had, I guess you could say, my share of that to a certain extent,
Well, I think we
unfortunately.
all have. I think in my mind, I would
Yeah.
like to have a no phone. When you go out, having a no phone zone, okay, the phones
Yeah.
get put away. And
Hmm.
some of the shows that we've watched in the past, we do a workout every morning. We get up early and do a Bible study and then go out and work out. We have a little gym
Hmm.
in our garage. And so we've gone through a lot of different shows while we've done that. And we're
Hmm.
watching Blue Bloods. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but at the table, they all sit at the table. Every show has them at the table praying before a meal. No phones are allowed at the table. So it's like, okay, instilling a little bit of this
Hmm.
within the parameters of a family, I think are a good thing. But,
Hmm.
we aren't going to solve all the world's issues, and we're certainly
Yeah.
not going to be able to stop the tide of what's going on. We can only be accountable for what we can do. But I'm
Right.
sure your book will speak to a lot of people, John, and I
Hmm.
think they'll open their eyes to
Hmm.
some of the things that are going on. And I'll
Hmm.
share you have no website, but we have an author Facebook page. I'll make sure we get that link in there. We'll get the back cover copy in there, and we'll get this out there, and hopefully you'll get some traction for this book. I think it sounds like a really compelling read. By any chance, is it on Kindle Unlimited?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
You can get it through you can get it through Amazon and of course Kindle Unlimited, and you can also order through many other bookstores as well. So it's being distributed beyond Amazon. So if you have a local bookstore, um, I've looked at some out on the web that I'm familiar with, and they might be able to get it as well. So
Okay.
it's actually beyond just Amazon and KDP.
So
So
your paperback is available then wider.
yes,
Perfect. Okay.
yeah, for other yeah through the other booksellers, yes, as well.
Awesome. Well, it's been a real pleasure, John. I thank you for coming on to Between the Lines and educating us a little bit on what's going on behind the scenes of television. And we appreciate that so much, and it's been a pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate it, Jennifer. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye bye.